We are live. What's going on, Mr. Todd? Are you on? Your mic?
Just chilling in the place to be, baby.
Wouldn't it be help if you would have had your mic in front of your face? My God, right out of the gate, man.
Hey, man, you know the pregame.
Stupid.
You know.
You stupid.
I don't understand. You did this in front of a guest, man.
Hey, man, shit. Different entrance.
Oh, my goodness, man. Well, we're going to pretend that didn't happen. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Late Night Green Interview Edition. Happy Tuesday, and we've got a good one for you tonight, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
And so we've been covering the Pennsylvania situation for a while now. We have personal interest in it.
Yes, we do.
We've had Abby and Emily on just a couple of weeks ago. You missed that.
Yeah.
You weren't here. Steve took over for you in that
That's
situation. Right. But we had a really good interview. We learned a lot. They explained a lot. And tonight is a continuation of that because we've got a special guest with us.
Great. That's great.
You ready? You want to introduce her or you want me to introduce her?
Let you have the pleasure.
Right, I'm going to do it. Welcome to the show, Meredith. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Good. Why don't you pull that mic right
Closer?
up to you? Yeah.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And the closer the better.
The closer the better.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
So, guys, Meredith Buettner Schneider. Did I get that right?
You got it right. Thank you.
And she is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition.
You got it all right. Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. We've been trying to figure out how to get you for a minute, and so we appreciate you being here. And probably excuse me, but probably the timing is real good because there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
So what we're going to do over the next hour is unpack that. I want to start with just about who you are.
Sure.
Let's let everyone get comfortable with who you are, how you got to this position, and then we'll talk about what is the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition,
Okay.
and then we'll dive into the numerous details of
what's going on,
issues that we have to deal with.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm the executive director of the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition. The best way to explain it is I'm a cannabis lobbyist. I'm trying to change the laws and the regulations here in Pennsylvania. On a personal level, I'm a consumer. I'm a patient. I'm a mom. I'm the wife of a patient, and I approach cannabis with all of those things in mind. I have people in my life who their lives have been changed by cannabis. And when I was approached about potentially taking on this role, I said, let's do it. If I can help more people by creating more access to this plant, I want to be able to do that. So my background is in politics and fundraising. So I knew that part of this. I only really knew cannabis as a consumer, though, and as someone who had always had a relationship with it since I was in high school. And I didn't really know the ins and outs of the plants and the policy and all of that stuff. So I had to kind of learn that as I went. But I had a knack for the politics and that part of it. So I was able to put two things together that I really liked. And I've been rolling with it for 5 years. So,
5 years now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what is the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition, and did it exist before you? I'm assuming it did.
It did. So the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition came together shortly after the medical marijuana law was passed in 2016.
Okay.
There have been several groups that had worked on the medical marijuana effort here in Pennsylvania. And there was a couple different groups, and then they ended up getting put together in one group that came out as the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition. So I believe I'm the second executive director.
Okay.
So I've been here since June of 2020. So we represent operators in the existing marketplace here in Pennsylvania. So medical marijuana permit holders, so dispensary permit holders, grower processors, and then we have a unique kind of permit type called a clinical registrant here in Pennsylvania, where they have a permit to grow, process, they have a permit to dispense, and then they have an obligation to work with one of the state's medical colleges to do medical cannabis research. So that's really cool. We also have a bunch of ancillary businesses that are members of the coalition. So folks that are part of the supply chain, everybody from transportation companies to consulting businesses to law firms, packaging and labeling, anything you can think of, we have a space for those folks to be part of of the policy making and part of our group too, right? So when you think about cannabis policy making, the whole supply chain needs some kind of representation, right? So we're here to represent it.
So
who
funds this? Is it funded by the state?
So we're a membership-based organization.
Okay.
So our members pay, dues on a quarterly basis. Our ancillary members pay dues on an annual basis, and that's how we fund the organization.
Are you a member?
No, I'm not a member. No. But it sounds like a great resource.
Yeah.
For all these different entities.
So we, being in cannabis digital media, should be a member.
Let's talk about that.
We got to talk about
absolutely.
that. Absolutely.
So we do, not only do we do lobbying and advocating to change the laws and to change the regulations, we do a little bit of networking and those type of things. So, I think it is a good space for kind of the cannabis business community here in Pennsylvania.
In general. And the events are where all over the state.
Yeah. We mostly do Harrisburg because we try to keep it central when we're doing like a lobbying day and then an event at the same time. But we've done a couple in Philadelphia as well. So.
How many people are part of the coalition?
That's a good question there.
So we represent a little bit more than 50% of the permit holders in Pennsylvania. So there's a bunch of companies that have multiple permits. So it's hard to talk about an exact number, but we represent a little over 50% of the permits in Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's a good representation.
Yeah.
And is there corporate sponsors, or are they all considered corporate members?
I guess they'd all be considered corporate members, right? So we have different levels of membership, and we do treat permit holders a little bit different than some of the ancillary businesses, just in terms of how our bylaws are set up and things like that. But
Gotcha.
All based really on company size. So.
And so your background before you did this, as you were an advocate for cannabis, but you were in fundraising. So you did fundraisers for different politicians, different campaigns, that kind of stuff?
Yep. So for about 10 years, I was a political fundraiser. I did fundraisers from everybody at the local level all the way up to presidential candidates when they would come to town.
And would it be for Democrats and Republicans?
So I did mostly Republicans here in southeastern Pennsylvania, some Democrats every once in a while. I wish a lot of my clients were still in office because they were moderate Republicans here in southeastern Pennsylvania that I think actually would make the cannabis conversation in Harrisburg a lot easier. Yeah. So not that the guys and gals that are in office now aren't good on our issue, but when you're trying to get to that number, right, that you need to pass a piece of legislation, having some moderate, friendly Republicans, that would be folks you and I would really want to mix and mingle with, that hurts our efforts.
I think having moderate people on either side is hard to find now. We live in a very, very just divided time. People don't want to agree on anything, and they'll go out of their way to disagree at this point. So it makes getting things done hard.
Yeah, but one side wants to smoke and relax, and the other side is dragging their feet. So we're hoping that we push, push forward, and everybody gets good faith and just come together and get this thing going.
Yep. So I'll rewind a little bit and say, so last year we had Emily in when she was working on the first bill that she was involved in, from what I understand, and we learned a lot about the philosophy and why. I mean, we talked about homegrown and a lot of different things, but I guess at the end of the day, they just ran out of time on their session. And so one of the things I asked her is, how much of an existing bill gets adopted forward when you have basically a session change like that, where legislation just kind of falls off, then it gets picked up again. What do you have anything to do in that process? Do you try to influence that process?
Yeah, sure. So, Emily and Representative Aaron Coffer, who's a great example of a Republican who was with us that's not in office anymore, they put together a really good bill last fall. HB 2500 was a great piece of legislation. But in the space between the session ending last year and session picking back up again this year, it does give you the time to make necessary changes. And one thing I find really fascinating about cannabis policy is it's moving so quickly. I always say like a year in cannabis is like 5 years in anything else, right? Because the science is changing so rapidly, the policy is changing so rapidly. More people are coming on board and thinking, and changing their opinion about it.
The industry's still in its infancy. I mean,
exactly. We're still trying to figure out what our growing pains even are.
That's right. So 12 months is a long time.
So between November when the session ended and January and the session started, a lot of people would say like, okay, that's 45 days. And I'd say, okay, that's 90 days, right? Like in cannabis time. So I think there was time to change
it. Like dog years, but reverse.
Exactly. And it sounds like they're still trying to work out some of the kinks and get it filed. And certainly our organization always makes ourselves available to help with those type of things and give feedback on drafts that are shared with us. And, we have some core principles about things that we really want to see in a bill. And there's things that, since we approach things from a business perspective, right, there are some maybe like consumer focused things that we care about, but they're not hills we're going to die on, right? Like I have a constituency that I represent. So trying to find a balance there.
Let's talk about
Sure.
what are some of those?
So I think one of the things that's really important to us is to use the existing market to roll out an adult use program, right? So, and we've seen varying successes of cannabis programs all across the country, but one of the things that we see is, when there's a lot of space between legalization and access to legal product, we tend to have problems, right? Take New York, for example, where it took a long time to get legal access, for folks, and we saw all those illegal shops
pop up. They took it
themselves.
themselves.
So one thing I'm really proud of is, as an existing industry, we have almost 200 dispensaries open here in Pennsylvania that are only accessible by patients right now, right? But very easily we could put some rules and regulations in place and turn those on for adult use consumers. So that's really important to our folks.
So number one, we want to use the existing infrastructure, and I couldn't agree with you.
I couldn't agree. The source is there. It's like so know where McDonald's is.
So this last bill
I like that one.
Right.
Yeah, I like
consistency.
That.
So
consistency.
this last bill that got shot down in the committee on the Senate side, right? Mm-hmm. The logic behind it was what? Just to make it so appealing to one side that they might be able to squeak it through on the state store system? Because I see no logic in that. I don't even think the state should sell alcohol, let alone our cannabis. So what do you believe the logic was behind that? Because I still don't necessarily think I understand.
So I don't think I 100% understand either, but what I came to understand as we moved through the process was that the bill contained a lot of Democratic Party ideals from the standpoint of the drafters, and all of those things, whether it was labor union involvement or public health and safety or social equity or whatever those things were, they felt like their draft best carried those principles. Some areas, I think their draft did a really, really good job at handling things. Other areas, we disagreed with them on. What I respected was the House Democratic leadership felt that was their best bet to get 102 votes to get a bill out of the House and over to the Senate. I think where we really disagreed was what the Senate would then do with that, right? So the Senate could have amended that bill, right? Used it as a vehicle and amended. That's not what the Senate chose to do. They actually chose to bring the bill up for a vote in committee and kill it, which is kind of unheard of. Usually what these guys do in Harrisburg is they just let it sit. They don't even call it up for a vote. So it was really interesting.
They wanted to make a statement. They were trying to make a statement.
They wanted to make that statement. And that, it's unfortunate because the bill died because of that. But I think that it was an interesting fate for the concept of the state store model.
Meredith,
I'll put it that way.
Am I crazy for thinking we dodged a bullet?
No, I don't. I don't think you're crazy for dodging a bullet.
Okay.
I mean, I will tell you when I took this job, and remember, I come from this moderate Republican Southeastern background. Mm-hmm. When I first took this job, I was like, well, maybe we'll legalize cannabis and privatize the liquor stores as like an exchange, right? Because like the Republicans want the liquor stores privatized and the Democrats want legalization. Like maybe we could work out some big grand ordeal. Mm-hmm. Now, I realized I was very naive as an advocacy professional about that. But, I do think that when you think about it from a public health perspective and the fact that the government can play a role there, and that they understand like the distribution of a controlled substance at a very large scale, there certainly were arguments to be made for it. A lot of those arguments were based in what we've seen happen in Canada with their state control of cannabis. We have a different form of federal government than they do in Canada. So I think things would have rolled out really differently. And one of the things I care a lot about as a taxpayer is like the startup costs of a cannabis program, right? Like I think cannabis should be like a revenue driver, not a budget driver that eats money, right? So
nor should it take us 24 months to get in the clear. It should happen immediately.
Right. So like if we use
big investment and a lot of time.
Right. So if we use that existing infrastructure, these companies have already invested hundreds of $1 million into Pennsylvania, and you can just put some new rules and regulations in place and not only turn on the access, but turn on the revenue. Like I think we have to give that serious consideration.
And it's what the people want. They've already been surveyed. I think it's like 19% of the people are okay with the state store system. I guarantee you those 19% don't even smoke weed.
Right. So
they probably alcoholics, and they're already used to going there.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
And I as a consumer and as someone who came to this space because I have several people in my life who cannabis has made a real difference in their relationship with alcohol in a positive way, right? They've backed off their alcohol consumption in favor of cannabis consumption. Asking those folks to go purchase cannabis when it's right next to the bourbon that maybe got them into the situation that they're in, it just doesn't sit well with me.
It's just a bad idea.
That's too much.
The people that work at the state stores, and as nice as they can be, they're not equipped. They don't know this. It's usually an older workforce.
That's a separate business.
It's a separate thing. It shouldn't even be considered. I'm surprised it even got out of house, to be honest with you.
I'm just glad that we can start talking about other bills.
Yes.
Right? So, like, I'm anxiously awaiting Emily and Abby filing their bill again, Representative Kincaid and Representative Major filing their bill again. I think we're going to see Senator Laughlin and Senator Street file their bill right around the same time. We're really looking forward to seeing those bills running.
So we talked to Emily and Abby. What do you I think we're up to speed with what they're doing. What's the other bill with Laughlin and
Street?
What does that look like?
I think it'll look kind of similar to what Representative Kincaid and Representative Major are doing. So I think the idea is that they're companion bills, bipartisan bill in the House, bipartisan bill in the Senate. Sure. And just like Emily's effort over the last couple of years, we've seen Senator Street and Senator Laughlin file a similar bill year after year. And what we've seen is that bill improve and account for changes in the market, account for things that we've learned. For instance, like social equity policy has so evolved, right? Since like the first states tried to do it. Now we've learned that like you can't just give people licenses without access to capital, right? Like you can't charge them the same fees that you're charging an MSO. We learned a lot. Like if you craft the language one way, somebody from Los Angeles is going to sue you because they don't fit under the categories, right? Like we've learned a lot about social equity policy. So every time that legislation is refiled, you're able to tweak it.
Right.
And that gives us a better, I think, holistic product to start working with, because one thing that's really hard in the legislative process is the amendment process and changing a bill once it starts moving. So the better product we can start with, the better product.
The less nonsense on the back end, because like you said, it could go to the other chamber and sit and sit and sit. If they're not willing to even amend it or work on it or massage it or try to even come to any common ground.
Yep.
So that's a risk. So it's like I agree with you that it's much better to have these conversations up front, work some of these things out so it can get passed this year, so it can get moved forward. What about the before I leave that, are there any main differences? Does one have home grow versus the other? Because there's some big items.
I think both have home grow. To my knowledge, neither have been filed yet.
I guess from what Emily said and what Abby said is that theirs will not have home grow.
I think it doesn't have home grow for patients. It may have home grow just for patients and not for.
I see.
So what is it? So it's a lot of effort, a lot of legislation. People are putting a lot of time and effort to getting this passed. It's not working. What is, and I know there are a few issues, but what is the biggest obstacle in getting this through? Getting it approved?
I think education. I think there's a lot of members of the legislature that still don't know enough about cannabis to be comfortable with it, right?
Because they were programmed by all of this propaganda around you.
Well, you know what? Let's invite them to the studio.
Okay.
Well, and we spent
give them the first hand.
We
you
spend
think
a
you think you
lot
can
of time.
orchestrate a field trip for
The field
somebody?
trip? Yeah. I'm all about field trips. And one of the field trips we try to do is get legislators to grow facilities and to dispensaries to demonstrate to them that, like, this is a real business. Like, this is an agricultural manufacturing business. We're creating a ton of jobs. Like, they're fascinating facilities. And, like, a dispensary looks like an Apple store, right? Like, we have age gating. You can't get in the door without showing your patient ID. Like, so trying to educate them about how it actually works really goes a long way. And I think that there's been some other challenges that have popped up that have prevented folks from learning about the issue at hand. Like, we've spent time dealing with some of these hemp intoxicants and the gas station cannabis and things like that. So we're not getting to the core of the conversation about what a truly regulated cannabis marketplace could look like in Pennsylvania, because we're dealing with some of the other issues.
Texas took a position on it, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's super interesting. I mean, we have like less than a dozen states that have not taken a position on it
so
now.
What is the
really
Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition on hemp? Is that part of what you represent, or do you just stick to cannabis?
So the whole plant, right? It's the whole plant, right? So I mean, our general position is if it's from the plant, we're for it, and if it's in synthetic, made in a lab, it's not our jam, right?
Fair enough.
But
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and I think as we see that policy evolving around the country, that a lot of states are ending up somewhere in that space. But right now, we don't have a framework to pool those products produced outside of a medical market in, right? So we'd have to tackle that. And I personally think the best way to do that is to create an adult use framework. And then you have dispensaries that can serve consumers 21 and over, and you can pull all of those products that come from the plant under one retail roof. So adult use.
I have a proclamation.
Yep. You have a proclamation?
Yes.
All right, hold on a second.
We need Meredith.
Yes.
Abby.
Yes.
And Emily.
Yes.
To escort us down to Harrisburg to the chamber.
Yeah.
And get everybody out their seats down to the main floor, and let's puff up and see what's going on. You know what I mean? That's the only way. Let's let them see how it feels.
You never seem to. You amaze me. So we did talk to them, and we talked to Paul about doing a field trip out there for Late Night Green. But you've taken it to a whole new level.
Let's go inside and just.
You want to go onto the Senate floor, and you want to
ring the bell.
Do I have? Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
So, you messed me up, man.
Listen.
You just took me out.
I'm trying to move this forward.
But I like your idea, and I think that more elected officials having some kind of exposure to the cannabis space, the industry, the culture, all of that, it does help. We just have to kind of meet them where they are, right? So I've got some legislators that aren't ready to talk about how to do it because they're still scared of it and don't understand it. So I've got to approach them differently than I approach somebody like the folks you've gotten to interact with. Like talking to Emily and Abby about it, like the fact that we're even talking about them at their first names is a very different relationship than some of the other representatives and
that
senators.
alone,
very good point.
That's a great point because that alone wouldn't happen.
Right, that alone wouldn't happen. And I
that speaks volumes.
I think highly of them, and it's almost. You've probably noticed I'm going back and forth between representative and calling them by their first names, but you're meeting different people at different places in their journey with how they feel about cannabis. And I think that's the hard thing. We've got 203 House members and 50 senators. It's a lot of people to wrap your arms around.
But think about it, Meredith. On one hand, you have somebody that would maybe insist that calling them representative before you talk to them would be the most appropriate way to handle it. And if you did it any other way, you're probably not being respectful. Versus the mindset that we've already gotten past that formality. We've connected on a personal level. Whether we agree on everything or not, because we don't, we agree on enough. And I think the personalities involved and the willingness to have that conversation are so present that we can get to the first name and be able to, because I say Emily and Abby because that's how I've gotten to that level of comfort. That we had a great interview, and that's where that's where I'm coming from. But the fact
that you can recognize that and kind of understand what I'm talking about is really important to the process of how we do lobbying and how we advance legislation, right? Like we have to build relationships and meet folks where we are so that we can advance it to the next step. And one thing that I think is really important, is giving folks like Emily and Abby or Senator Laughlin and Senator Street the tools they need to talk to their colleagues, to get their colleagues to the table on the conversation. Because sometimes I'm not the best messenger to talk to another.
Sure.
Sometimes they need to talk to each
other. They may not want to hear from
you.
They may not in any personal way, but they just need to hear from
somebody in their world.
I always wear a cannabis pin on my.
I was admiring that pin.
I like that. Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
I have ones that look like my logo. I brought them for you guys. Don't let me leave without giving them to you.
Okay, so when we come back from, we're going to do a commercial in a minute, but when we come back from commercial, we're going to do a pin exchange because we have a pin for you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
I'm glad I brought them.
This is exciting, guys.
Yes.
A pin exchange. Go figure. Well, why don't we do that, guys? Control room, cue up the commercial. We're going to take that commercial now. We'll come back, do our pin exchange, and then I want to talk about things like home grow again, Second Amendment, social reform, justice and equity, and DUI.
All the important stuff.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. We'll be back right after this.
So many dispensaries have resorted to a bland, impersonal shopping experience, where you often don't even get to see a sample of the cannabis you're planning on purchasing before you buy it. If you're looking for that extra personal touch, come check out High Roller Dispensary in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Our staff are avid cannabis connoisseurs who are sure to help you find the strains that fit you best. Whether you're looking for premium flower, edibles, concentrates, or tinctures, we have you covered with over 100 different strains to choose from, all of which are able to be seen, smelled, and thoroughly examined in our elegant showroom. If you're in a rush, we offer a seamless online ordering system that allows for in-depth exploration of all that we have to offer. So whether you're a novice or a seasoned stoner, be sure to stop by High Roller Dispensary and we'll make sure you're floating on Cloud 9 by the time you leave.
Marijuana is huge.
Hey, I'm OG Ganja Goddess, and you're watching Cough Country TV. Peace.
This is Chef Marvin Jane, and you're watching Cough Country TV, live from New York.
Right around here, 15 inches, maybe if you're younger, you go up to 19 inches, Yeah, you already went the big end.
Sometimes a CIO might make commitments to a CEO that they just can't fulfill. And it's very hard to succeed in those environments. You really want to be able to set the expectation right up front.
How would you feel with no sex, no weed for a month or two? I'm going to be really angry.
I just feel sorry for Jake.
Yeah, Jake's going to get fucked up.
Wow, this is
Phil.
This is all you. This is the Cough Country OG pink hoodie.
In terms of marijuana, I think it should happen.
And we are back. Just enough time, right?
We only need a little bit of time.
That's all we need is a little bit. So we got that. All right, cool. So I am very glad. Guys, by the way, you're watching Late Night Green. We are doing an interview edition, and we have Meredith Buettner Schneider with us. She is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition, and they work with basically all of the industry within Pennsylvania that has anything to do with cannabis or those who are licensed, and they represent their best interests.
Yep.
As best as you can.
Trying to get legalization done and make the medical marijuana program better.
Yep. So right before commercial, guys, I'll give you the backstory. So today, in preparation for this, I was watching an interview, and I was talking to Kathleen, and I said, and she goes, and Kathleen said to me, she goes, I really like the pin that Meredith has on. And I'm like, I do too, but we have a pin as well. And I'm going to give her a pin tonight. And I showed her a picture of what, and she goes, she's going to love it.
I love it.
So tonight we are going to exchange pins. Have you seen our pins? You've seen
I've seen our pins.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do, and I guess if you got control room, put the camera up on here if you can. Maybe I can show it this way. I know you don't have. Anyway, I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, but here you go.
Yeah, and these are ours. So I gotta get in front of the microphone, and there's a bunch more. So make sure Kathleen gets one too. And
yeah, I like your
chapstick.
pen.
Yeah. So, but this is funny. So my husband bought me this lapel pin for Christmas, and I started wearing it in the Capitol, and everybody kept saying to me, "I love your pin. I love your pin. I love your pin." And I thought, you know what? That is the swag I need, right? So I got the pins. I hand them out to legislators, to whoever.
So
will
these
wear
were
them.
already made.
No, I had them.
You had
I
them
had
made.
them
This is
designed.
the
it's our logo.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So now I joke that I wear it in the Capitol, and then legislators can just decide if they want to talk to me or not because they just see my cannabis.
But not only
leaf pin.
that, here's what I think should happen. I think if you're a legislator in Pennsylvania that is for cannabis in any such way, you should have this pin and our pin on your lapel, on your blazer or your suit jacket or whatever.
And the day of the vote on 1200, even though it, at the end of the day, the bill failed, but the day the House voted on it, a couple legislators did have them on. And that felt really good because when I took this job 5 years ago, I never could have imagined a world where we saw a legislator. Like I was hoping for a world where a legislator would have a cannabis leaf on their jacket on the floor, but I wasn't sure it was going to happen. And it took 5 years, but it happened. And it's progress.
And you cracked that egg open, didn't you?
Yeah.
So when we're done, I have an idea because I think maybe we could do something together where we send these pins out to all of the Pennsylvania legislators and say, if you stand with us, wear the pins.
I like that idea.
See that?
Let's get them.
Let's get them. We should do it before the
smoke out in the Harrisburg chamber.
No, before our field trip because after you're done there, they're not going to take anything. So Meredith, thank you. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And then she also gave us some other stuff, which is
just chapstick.
Some chapstick.
Who says no to chapstick?
No, who says everyone needs this? Matter of fact,
man, take all of them,
brother.
Your lips look dry as hell.
Bruh. You need this. All right. So,
got any lotion?
No.
All right. No, brother needs some lotion.
Oh my! Oh my good. He's gonna go into his whole ash story now and tell you how bad his ash is. Okay, so from ash to hash, let's talk about.
I like that. Good transition.
Yeah, I had to do something there. Let's talk about some of the issues that I think are relevant for Pennsylvania. So, and we'll start with the one because we took a lot of shit after our first interview with Emily, Representative Kincaid, and we took a lot of shit because there's people out there who are quite angry that the bill did not include home grow. And so while we were basically, just because they're on our show doesn't mean we agree with everything that they
absolutely.
do, but we are supportive of them and what they do, and we also let them explain why. And the why before is the same as the why this last time around, which was, hey, we're trying to make this bill slim and lean enough so it can get through.
It's very difficult.
When I talked to, I don't know if you know Representative Friel.
Yep.
Okay, so him and I went to college together.
Okay.
He was on the
Another
show.
Temple
Nice.
guy.
Another Temple guy. Todd knows him real well. And I was talking to him, and he's like, well, maybe I would do like an amendment or something. And I said, listen, you would be a freaking hero in Pennsylvania for doing that.
Yep.
At least in my opinion, you would. And I think that's the way it needs to get layered. I think some of the heat has to get taken off the core group. They can't take it all. So I think being able to take these components, and while we understand why they weren't put in the beginning, and we understand that they don't necessarily disagree with it,
Right.
they're not against it. It's just that they chose to put their bill together without it in it so it could be leaner and get through.
Right.
We took shit because we didn't, denounce the fact that they didn't have home grow. So on the last go around, I basically said what our position is, Cough Country TV, Late Night Green Show. We're for home grow. We think that the only way to really legalize in a state is to allow people to grow it on their own, period.
Right.
So let's say if you had a chance to vote.
Okay.
And so let's forget the state part because we think that's a no-go.
Sure.
But if you had a vote and it didn't have home grow on it, would you vote for that? Being that maybe it might get through, because I think right now what the fight is. Everyone wants to get everything
It is
through,
a good question.
but there's different sticking points. So,
because
do we move forward and try to add later?
That's a good question.
Or stay where we're at?
Meredith, as he's asking me, it's quite a dilemma because you don't want to be the obstructionist.
Right. You don't want it to not get done at all because of that, right?
But at the same time, I
Yeah.
feel really strong about home grow. So
Understood.
where do I draw my line? I don't know. I think it should have home grow. I really do. Now, would I vote against it if a lot of the bill was if everything else was well addressed in the bill, like these other issues? Man, it would be pretty hard to do that. I would just hope that someone like Paul or someone else with good common sense would make an amendment and hopefully see. That's what I like about the amendment. It doesn't upset the entire apple cart.
Right.
It only upsets a part of the apple cart. It's like a disposal.
Yeah, and I
cart.
think that the thing that's hard is Pennsylvania's legislative process is really cumbersome, right? So even before we can talk about getting enough votes to get a bill through the House of Representatives, we've got to get a bill out of committee, right? So if a bill is going through the House Health Committee, how is that group of people going to approach an issue like home grow, right? We have to think about them before we even think about the entire chamber of the House of Representatives. If you're on the Senate side, it's got to go. Right now, the issue sits with the Law and Justice Committee, so you've got to get through a Law and Justice Committee made up of mostly Republican senators. So could you get a bill with home grow out of that committee, or are you better off putting home grow in on the floor? Now, my last read of a draft, I thought that there was home grow for patients in the bill.
There may be.
And I think on the Senate side, my understanding is that there is home grow for patients in the bill. I know that for a lot of folks, that's not enough, right? And that's not going to be a good answer. And they would say, vote no on that bill.
Right.
And I
But for
understand that.
But for those who have crossed the line, made the commitment to do the home grow for medical, they feel like they've gone way outside of their normal comfort
Right.
zone.
So
and they've done so much that why should they be asked to do anything more than that?
Yeah, so I think we've got to find a balance. Like if you could get it in there for patients right now, yes, I understand that's an extra step. I understand you have to go get your medical marijuana card. I understand you have to do all that, and you don't want to have to do that to grow this plant, right? I understand that, but that I think is a first step, right? And that would be a huge first step for Pennsylvania. Remember, we've had a medical marijuana programs. Our law passed in 2016. We're almost 10 years, and we haven't gotten a home grow amendment through for the medical program. So if we can move an adult use bill that has home grow for medical, that's a lot of progress.
It is.
And I know, incremental progress is hard when you've been fighting for something and working for something for so long. But
you just can't have it all
yeah,
sometimes. And listen, home grow could be put in afterwards.
It could
obviously.
be.
It's not. This is a
another
fluid
thing that you could do is so right now the medical marijuana program is regulated by the Department of Health. One of our other core principles that we believe at PCC is that there should be an independent regulatory body that regulates cannabis. I don't care if you call it the Cannabis Control Board. I don't care if you call it the Late Night Green Board. I don't care what you call it.
That.
As long as you don't call it the Department of Health, I don't care what you call it.
I think we call it the Late Night Green Board. That's got a nice ring.
The Late Night
That'll
Green
work.
Commission.
It's got a nice.
Maybe.
It's got a really nice ring to
nice
it.
ring
Yes.
to it.
I agree.
But you could give that regulatory body the authority to make this decision without having to go to the legislature. So then when you have a group of people on a control board who understand the plant, who appreciate the plant, and are in charge of putting together rules and regulations about it, maybe they put it in place, right? And you kind of, not that you circumvent the legislature because you've empowered this board to do it, but then you're not asking these folks that are really uncomfortable with home grow but comfortable with cannabis to take a vote like that.
Yeah.
So I think there's different legislative strategies to approach it. But I think, any bill that we've supported when it comes to adult use has included some form of home grow. Now, there's also going to be people that are going to want to fight over the details. If a bill says 2 plants, folks are going to say, that's not enough. I need 6 plants. But if we can get 2 plants through, we can increase that regulatory, going back to that regulatory body, they would have the authority to change a number like that, right? So and I know it's exhausting because there's been a lot of people that have been at this fight a lot longer than I have, than I have, right? But, as somebody who's building those relationships with legislators and figuring out what their pain points are.
The
this
thresholds.
Is one,
know, because you've gotten
you have to balance that.
And that's what's hard for people to understand. We're for home grow. I mean, we are but at the same time, I get it. I see what the issue is, we talk about these states, like you and I talked earlier and you said, Texas is all fucked up and California is all fucked up. Pardon our language. But, what did I say to you? The reason they probably are so fucked up is because they're on the extremes. What makes Pennsylvania interesting is that we've got a really interesting split down the middle. Yeah. That's what makes Pennsylvania so less volatile than some of these other states.
It's really purple.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing about home grow, I'll go back to harping on it, that it's education. There's legislators that think that if we allow home grow, we're going to have fields of cannabis growing.
Yeah, and that's unrealistic.
Folks don't realize
People don't even know how to
hard
grow.
It is to grow a plant.
Right.
This is the example I always give. I gave my dad a hot sauce making kit. It's still sitting on the shelf. He's not putting Tabasco out of business.
Right.
He didn't do it, right? I think there's a lot of people that will want to grow.
I didn't know they had such kits. Hot sauce making
kit, right?
Sounds fun.
My brother ain't know that.
I'll bring it next. That's
obscure.
I'll bring it next time I come because, like I said, it's still sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, bring it over.
Bring that over. I'll play with it.
But I think that legislators are really afraid that home grow is going to be taking over their neighborhoods, and I think we know we know that that's not the case.
But precedent knows as well,
right?
I mean,
it's like bathtub
we are not
gin,
state
right?
number one considering this. I mean, there's been a few ahead of time, and they're not having issues with home grow. They home grow in D.C.
Yeah,
and not only that, but people have made legitimate businesses going in and putting in these grow closets for people who don't.
I think what we have to show them is that more conservative states have embraced home grow and the sky hasn't fallen, right? I don't know if I could sell anybody the fact that DC has home grow right now. I don't think I could sell that in Harrisburg, but let's talk about it's been okay in Maryland. It's been okay in Ohio. It's been okay. And Michigan had some issues with their caregiver market getting really saturating the market. But
they're closer to.
But they're doing it.
But let's learn a lesson from that instead of
why not?
Exactly.
I mean, we'd only be foolish not to learn these lessons, and they're there.
It's the Quaker mind. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how long ago was it that we couldn't go to the liquor store on Sundays? That wasn't that long ago in Pennsylvania, right? So
when that was
in my lifetime.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean,
you couldn't go buy shit on Sunday.
Nope.
No, and there's still we still have counties in Pennsylvania where liquor stores aren't open 7 days a week. Like some of them are only open like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like we
what's it called? Blue
laws. Yeah.
Blue
Like
laws.
the fact that we have medical cannabis at all in a state like this is incredible. Right.
Speaking of that, so the medical cannabis industry is kind of taking a little bit of hit with more and more recreational coming online. So you have the medical industry been reaching out to you about those issues?
Yeah, so those are my members, the companies that make up the medical marijuana companies here in Pennsylvania. And I think, our two biggest kind of issues are all of our neighboring states have adult use cannabis. So if you live on a border, and 40% of our population lives within a half an hour drive of a neighboring state. So you can just go buy adult use cannabis there. Folks aren't renewing their cards. Folks are doing that. So we're taking a hit with the patient population. And then some of the intoxicating hemp products that are being sold outside of the regulated market are hurting medical cannabis businesses as well, too.
It got to be hurting them big time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we really think the best way to address all of those problems is through a comprehensive adult use bill, right? Those intoxicating hemp products, adult use is already here, right? You can go buy that stuff without a medical card.
But I think
anywhere. I'm sure in the mall right over here you can.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
But in those markets where they do have adult use and they have the hemp products are not. They're not irrelevant.
They're not irrelevant.
They are still relevant products.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you go to the trade shows, the money is in the hemp. The money is in the THCA. And
we take approach that we just want to make sure that stuff is safe, tested, regulated, and honestly taxed, right? Because that does help us legitimize what we're doing here.
Yeah, but so while I'm not against those products, they're not for me.
Right.
Okay, they're not for me. I'm not against them, but at the same time, man, it creates a really unfair situation for those who have spent the millions to license and go through all of the hoops and dot all the T.
It's kind of like bar owners, and then you got the pop-up bars.
Yep.
That was a major issue.
We've got to figure out a way to do.
These aren't even licensed.
But the bars had to spend a lot of thousands of dollars for the license seller. You get a pop-up, it's quicker and easier.
Right, but they still have to pay. In this situation, they don't pay anything.
No, but it's kind of the same thing.
No, it's along the lines.
No, well, you talk to the bartenders, they'll tell you they're very upset about the pop-up scene and all the money you have to spend for them to sell liquor.
Really?
It's just unfair. Then you have a pop-up tent with a bunch of liquor, and they sell a bunch of liquor and killing your sales. It's the same thing.
Well, I guess it's the same thing. It seems more devastating in this market because it's so prevalent. It's everywhere. It's like pop-up bars are here and there, but this product is in every gas station. It's in everything. Everywhere.
Well, and I think that there's a pathway for products produced from the plant that are produced the right way, whether it's with a permit, and let's create a pathway to pull those folks into the market and separate. I hate to put it this way, but separate the good actors from the bad actors, right? And if folks want to come in, and it is more complicated, right? Because if it's produced from hemp dry weight, it can cross state lines, right? It's not an easy problem we're talking about. And the real solution would be for Congress to take some action and give us some clarity on that, couple line section of the Farm Bill, right? For them to really take ownership and for there to be, a regulatory treatment for cannabis and hemp coming out of Washington, right? So we had some clarity.
That would even be bigger. Right? That's even a bigger
We want to maintain, I think, state control of this similarly as we do to alcohol in this country.
That's the benefit of the medical. But if I was a businessman and I'm going into the cannabis industry, right now I'll probably jump into the hemp industry. It's just less barriers. I can get right in, and not have to deal with all this regulation and everything.
Taking the easy way out.
Now, I'm a purist. I'm just talking business-wise.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be smoking the product. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to have a real product, but I'm going to be flipping that for the money so I can go get the real stuff.
So you brought up a point, and we'll go quick. We'll go a little bit quick fire on this on these next few issues. But you brought up the thing about the governing body, and one of the things I thought was a little bit interesting was, this is an agricultural product, and I don't know if you heard the last interview, but I kind of said it there, and I'll say it again, but it's an agricultural product, and if we gave farmers, like real farmers, an opportunity to get in the game, and again, it's a very, very different game, very, very different game. But it's still agriculture, and if we could have found a way to somehow make that work, it really could have set a precedent moving forward on how the government could look at it, the federal government, how other states could look at it. Do I think that the Liquor Control Board not handling? Yes, God, yeah, thank you for that.
That could cause a little bit more of the social justice issue too, as well. I like that idea with the farmers getting into it, but it's already a social justice issue now with a certain party.
And again, it's this ain't growing corn. This is way more complex. There's a lot of complexities. I mean, is there commercial outdoor grows? I don't even know if there are.
Not in Pennsylvania. So in other states, there are commercial outdoor grows. That's not permitted under the way the rules and regulations are written, which is why some of it would be a challenge to get farmers into the industry, but we'd have to think about what the rules and regulations are to make sure that we bring down like the regulatory burden enough that they could participate. But then also we've got to consider the regulatory burden of, let's call them commercial operators, and what we could do to lighten that burden too, right? So I think it's something that we could think about. And Representative Melissa Schusterman, who's actually fairly local too on the other side of Valley Forge Mountain, she has a piece of legislation that she filed about getting farmers involved in both the medical cannabis space in one iteration of the bill, and I think the current iteration of the bill is for adult use. And
I don't hate that idea at all. I like it.
We're an agricultural state.
We are.
So,
no
but
doubt.
what I think's important is talking to the stakeholders. Do the farmers want it? Do they want to consider it? Because you have to, like, what does it mean for them? Because remember, it's still federally illegal. So what does it mean for them in terms of subsidies that they're pulling for other products?
That's right.
What does it term? I was driving up to a conference in Hershey and passing like a lot of the farms that are part of like the Land O'Lake Collective or something like that.
Yeah.
What does it mean for their relationships with other businesses? Before we like dangle a shiny object in front of them, I think we have to think about some of this and talk to them about some of it before we do it, right?
But in terms of that, the federal government hasn't pulled funding from any states or any road projects for states that have gone recreational. And so, while that doesn't set the precedent, it does kind of speak to the fact that that's probably not going to happen.
Right.
But nonetheless, there's uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty and you're in business, you tend not to screw with it, no matter how much uncertainty there is.
It could provide it could provide an interesting step for some of these like generational farms as the younger generations maybe don't want to continue in the family farming business. Would this provide a new crop for them and want to stay in business? And it might, but let's get them to the table and have this conversation about what the best way to give them access
Absolutely.
to.
And I think they should be a part of the conversation. Let's see if this, like you said, let's see if the stakeholders are interested or not. But it does present an interesting idea, and I think if done properly and involved, it could set a road forward for the federal government on how they could do it. I'm not opposed to doing something different than everyone else, but it's got to make sense.
But you got that glass half full, glass half empty. We just did a story not too long ago about the California growers, Humboldt County and everything, and how all those guys, because of the drop in price of the cannabis at the stores, makes all the money they spend on equipment, all the money it takes to process the marijuana, they were losing money. Yeah. So a lot of them owed money to the state or to their people they bought equipment from, and what they did was just up and left their farms, left their houses. So it's it's complex.
And I think that's one of the things that concerns me as we're developing policy, that we don't want to create a market where there's an oversupply, right? We tend to see markets get in trouble, folks not able to pay their taxes because they can't sell their product, et cetera, when there's an oversupply. But at the same time, we want to balance that against making sure that we're creating enough opportunities, whether it's for farmers or for social equity applicants. Yes. We don't want to shut new entrants and folks that are interested out of the market. We just want to balance against setting up people we don't want to set people up to fail, right? We want to set people up to successful. So how can we make sure that they have the resources and make sure that the number of licenses are appropriate, so we're not just handing them out to watch people fail a couple years later.
And the rest is just normal business. You're going to have some succeed, some don't.
Right.
But you're setting them up for the maximum.
And you're making sure the playing field doesn't have like obstacles. It's not set up to benefit MSOs versus an individual or a smaller business.
In a market where, let's just be blunt, we are MSO dominated. My organization takes a position that those very businesses should get to market first. But how can we use that to help lessen the burden to entry for new market entrants, right? How can we make sure that on day one, the social equity fund has enough money?
So you have MSOs that are members and
yeah.
So, I mean, that's interesting because, there's a lot of people who think that they are very disruptive in their business practices we're not going to go down the MSO road because we're running out of time and I still want to handle DUI and I want to handle Second Amendment, but I think it's interesting. I'm okay with Pennsylvania getting creative and maybe even setting a new path forward for others to look at.
Yeah,
so I'm not opposed to that, and I think that's part of the selling, the opportunity for some of the legislators to understand that, like, listen, you can make quite a difference right now. A great idea right now could literally pave the whole path for federal. Yeah. So that's just my opinion. So in the minutes that we have left, what's your thoughts on this legislation and how it relates to Second Amendment, the crossover between medical cards and the right to carry, and then what's your whole thoughts on the DUI thing? I know they're huge topics and they're not easily discussed in moments, but.
So I think on the Second Amendment thing, again, we need a change out of Washington, right? I don't know that there's anything that we can do in law here that will really change it for gun holders here in Pennsylvania, right? I'd like to think that we'll see something coming out of Washington shortly on that. Just rescheduling would make a big difference, right? But it's stalled. I don't think we're going to see this iteration of this legislature take any action that would counter on NGC.
That's way down the road, I'm sure.
I think
if anything,
in my personal opinion, it's a state issue. 8 states are issuing the carry license. They're also issuing the medical cards.
Yeah,
they're not cross-referencing their back systems.
Right, it's the carry permit versus the purchase, though.
Yeah, so
right?
they're creating a situation for real patients who exercise their rights to carry. They're putting them in a real situations by not having some level of consideration in this bill for that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's something that should be considered, but if you're asking me if I think it will be considered, I don't think it will. I think it should be, right? I don't want to see your right to cannabis or your right to bear arms, infringed upon, right?
And what about DUI reform? Any thoughts on that?
So I think there'll be some clarification there, right? Which is really what we need. We've seen Senator Bartolotta from the western part of the state consistently file a bill to protect patients from being charged with DUI just for having cannabis metabolites in their system, right? Mm-hmm. That bill hasn't gotten a lot of traction. We've worked with folks on the House in introducing a similar fashion too. We can't do an adult use bill without addressing it. Our general policy recommendations are, no per se limits, right? And because that doesn't work. But something else that I think is really, really important is to make sure that the legislation accounts for federal standards and technology coming online. Mm-hmm. I think we're really close to seeing something like a breathalyzer test for cannabis, right?
We've covered that on Cough Country News. We've addressed it. You're right. It's getting closer, but there's still a huge part of it affects people very differently.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, some people it's not even an intoxicant. It's an enhancer, and so. I don't know how you go down that road of prosecuting people,
I know. And I will say, so something that we learned during budget hearings this year in Pennsylvania was that we have over 600 drug recognition experts trained in Pennsylvania, right? So law enforcement is already trained at the highest level to recognize impairment, right? So our law enforcement officers are trained. They have those tools. How can we build off of that, right? So if we're bringing in revenue from cannabis, we can ensure that law enforcement has the resources they need to continue that training, right? I'm not suggesting we give them resources to continue arrests or things like that. I'm specifically talking about continuing drug recognition training, right? And then there are some of these devices that are coming online. 2 companies come to mind, one called Gaze, another called Cognivue. They have 2 very different types of technology. One has like a VR headset. One has a device that's no bigger than your laptop that law enforcement can use to like record what they see for the impairment. So I always say, like, when you go to the eye doctor and that they do that like shaky eye test. So that's kind of what both of these devices do, and they measure your eye movement. And then the law enforcement officer has a recording of that evidence that they say you were impaired. So then it's not impaired. So then it's not necessarily the law enforcement officer's word against yours. There's actually a piece of evidence created.
But what is impaired?
This measures eye movement, which is one of the main things that drug recognition experts are trained to recognize.
And that's marijuana and alcohol?
It would be
anything.
Right, and it would be anything.
We need to have them come in here and test you is what they need.
Man, come test this shit out right now.
I mean, I'll hook you up with these guys if you want to talk to them.
We do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we actually had them bring the VR headset to the Capitol, and we had some legislators who were brave enough to do the test. And, you know, they're coming to work. They were like, I'm definitely not impaired. I'm like, I know. Like, and we set them up, and you sit in a chair and you do it. And again, it was part of that education. They were impressed with the technology.
Were they impaired?
No. They weren't.
Well, shit, we need a real test.
But again, it's part of that education, right? Showing them that there is a tool available.
Man, look, let me hold that test up.
Let's calibrate it.
Yeah.
Make sure it works. I'm in. We can all participate consume differently, and we'll make sure it works.
I want to get my baseline.
Okay, deal.
So if they catch me later, they know where my shit is at.
Right. So basically, nothing's going to happen on this on the Second Amendment. There might be some things happening on DUI.
There could be progress on the Second Amendment stuff. I know, like, a lot of the criminal justice matters are things that Emily cares really deeply about. I'm not sure. I do not remember how their bill treated it. I know it's a question that's going to come up, and my gut tells me it's going to be one of the really hard ones to answer.
Yeah. I don't know. All this is hard, man. I guess if it was easy, it'd be done already, wouldn't it?
I agree.
And you wouldn't even have a job.
And it's a little bit of job security that some of it's hard, right? I know we joke about that a little bit, but I'm here for the fight. I'm here for it. I believe in it. We got to get it done for, so many reasons, but.
I mean, listen, this was super. I mean, I think you and I think obviously we're going to talk more and whatnot and see how we can help each other. But at the same time, it was really informative to have you here. And it was a pleasure to have you here. And I feel like we learned a lot as well.
Yeah. In the fight.
It's the good fight. You're fighting.
Well, and as legislation
They say you're doing God's work.
I love it. As we see legislation, moving, like I'll hop over and let's update everybody on what's going on. I'm happy to do it.
That's what we would love to do.
And if I've got to do it from my computer in Harrisburg because things are moving quickly, we'll do that, right? So I'm happy to be a resource for you guys and for your listeners and what's going on in Pennsylvania, and happy to work with you guys.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that. I was going to give you the last word, but I think that was a great last word.
That's perfect. Sorry.
Yeah, that's perfect. Anything from you, Mr. Todd?
Man, I just want to thank her for coming on and sharing the knowledge with us. It was great.
It was.
Hey, another good day.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys. So let's see here. 9:44. We'll be back on at 10:15. We're going to do a late night show. I have to see if they're rioting, because if they're rioting, we're doing riots and bong hits. We're doing riots and bong hits. Riot coverage. We're going to do bong hits. If they're rioting, we're going to pull out the Illadelph glass.
Illadelph, baby.
Yeah. So, and then we have a couple Cough Country news stories, and then we'll get out of here. We'll see what happens. Guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Meredith, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it. We'll see you guys at 10:15. Guys, give us a like, subscribe, follow, go over. Where can they find you?
pcanna.org.
pcanna.org. We'll try to get that in the description or one of the pinned comments. Guys, thank you for joining us. Be sure. We'll deal with the rest of it later at 10 o'clock. Guys, thank you. We'll see you later. Peace.